Alright guys, so Palworld 1.0 launch is finally here, and if you're jumping in for the first time, a returning player, or just want a bit of a refresher, in today's video I'm going to be breaking down pretty much how to have a pretty solid start in Palworld. This is very much towards the early game, so if you're already level 60, by the time you're watching this video it may not apply to you, but the idea here is to give you one of the most important aspects of a new survival game, and that is just some general direction. I'm going to give you an idea of what you should be trying to achieve early on, go over a handful of pals that are extremely solid for early game, some new, some old. I'm also going to give you some pretty solid combat tips, also show you some of the best starter base location, while also giving you some smaller tips that's going to help your overall progression. That's what we're going to be going over in this video. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's dive right on in. Alright, first let's talk about a little bit of direction on what you should be trying to accomplish while playing Palworld. The first major thing is probably pretty obvious, and that is to capture as many pals as possible. Maybe not as many as possible. Generally, the cap that you want to capture is probably around 5. I'm not someone who really likes capturing a lot of monsters. I usually want 1 and then move on. In this game, generally you want to aim towards 5. The reason for this is simple. Every time you capture a pal, you get more XP. The first time you capture a new pal, you get an increased amount of XP. And then once you get 5 pals, you reach the XP threshold where you don't get a lot of I would say a burst of XP, because 5 is the hard threshold. If you want to capture more, of course, you should aim to do that, especially if you're looking for a breed line. I wouldn't recommend a breed line early on because it's kind of hard to establish and breed properly. But generally speaking, your first thing is making sure to capture 5 pals of each type early on. The other thing in this one, once again, is probably pretty obvious, and that is going over the main story quest and focusing on the major beats, which is going to be going against each of the individual tower bosses. Now, one thing to keep in mind about these bosses is their scaling is usually around 10 levels per boss. So the first boss, which is going to be Rain, you're going to face her around level 10. The second boss, which is going to be the Tower of the Free Pal, this one is going to be at level 20, and so on and so forth. Once you get to the higher bosses, they'll probably scale at an interval of 5. So generally speaking, once you get to about 10 levels, at least early on, then try to aim to take out these bosses, as they're going to give you progression towards the main story. Now, the reason why you want to face these bosses is simple. You want to unlock different parts of the map, and you're going to be restricted from where you're able to go if you don't unlock these bosses. So eventually you're going to have to do it. I would just say just actively do it as you hit those intervals of levels and focus down these bosses. Now, in addition to the thing where I say, focus on getting 5 of each pal, you need to focus on also getting pals that work pretty well for your base. I'm going to go over a handful that can work extremely well to meet certain needs. I'm going to try to keep it around level 20 or lower, give or take. One of the first pals I would highly recommend you getting is a Pin King. Pin King is one of the best pals because it comes with a good variety of things: transporting, handiwork, cooling, mining, and watering. This will cover a good portion of your bases. And the great thing about Pin King is he's actually fairly farmable and fairly easy to get to. So as you can see right here, going over to the map, these are all specific boss locations. I guess technically this is another tip, but there are deterministic spawns of bosses that you can do, which you could farm a specific boss type if you want. But for example, Pin King, he's a great one because he's going to cover a lot of your bases. You can find him here on the map. Another really good one is Bristella. This one is going to be good because it does a lot of good things: planting, handiwork, gathering, medical products, as well as transporting. Between this one and Pin King, you're actually able to handle all your farm needs just from these two alone, and you will also be able to handle most of your handiwork needs. Now, there are some that do better handiwork than these two, but just grabbing these 2 pals specifically will actually do most of what you need done. If you're trying to find where Bristella is, they wander around in this region here quite heavily, a little bit to the north of where we saw Pin King, but they are very heavily vested in this area. You'll find them very easy. Another extremely good pal that you should be trying to aim towards is going to be Ruby. Ruby is very good because it gives farming and kindling bonuses. As you can see, when you compare it to the Fire Sparks, it has the literal same kindling, but you also get the ability to get flame organs. Flame organs are going to be used for plenty of crafting opportunities that you're going to need, so obviously having a Ruby is going to be very beneficial. Ruby is fairly easy to be found as well. She's in the same area as Pin King, so coming over here and grabbing both is super easy. For the same reason you want Ruby, it's the same exact reason why you want Sparkit. Sparkit is going to be your early game lightning pal that you want. It can drop electric organs when put into the farm. It does transporting, handiwork, and it does comparable lightning to every other early game lightning pal. So you can generate your bases if you eventually get to that point early on. this is going to be the other one you need to pick up. And while not necessarily in the same area as those other two, is right here, right next to it. So go ahead and go grab that pal. Another really important pal you need to pick up is Vixie. I would argue it's probably more important than most other pals. The reason for this is when you put them in the farm, just like the other pals, she gets other things. She will be able to dig up bones. She will be able to dig up coins, pal balls, and I believe arrows. Finally, the last pal that I would 100% recommend is a fairly new one, and that is Turticle. And what this one does is reduces ore weight by 80%. This means that effectively you can have 5 times as much ore in your inventory when you're actively farming. From what I can tell, they can spawn in any of these caves that's on the map right now that I have marked. I don't think there's a coordinate thing I can give you guys, but generally speaking, all these caves that I have marked on the map here, they all can have him inside of it, so make sure you go ahead and hit those. All right, next let's go over a handful of base locations, and obviously, as you can see now, I'm going over one of the first ones, and it's this awesome base location. This one has quartz, metal, plenty of stone, the palladium. It just has pretty much everything you would need. It also has access to eggs over there in the cliffside, and you have this massive AoE and space where you can actively build. You also have access to a tower up there that lets you teleport, and it's just generally one of the best starter base locations that you can easily come to. You even got a tree over there where you can get some skill trees. Where it's located is about here on the map. Another extremely solid basing location is going to be here at the Desolate Church. You need to come here to get your pal powers anyway. But as you can see here, we have a massive amount of metal that you're going to absolutely need. And this massive flat area here where you can just put things down. Palladium all on the side here where you can get your pal balls or whatever you need. And this is just arguably one of the best spots in the whole entire game. I would say around 80 negative 423 is going to be another very solid base location. Another really awesome base location is here. As you can see here, you have access to metal. You have a lake over there that has palladium as well as just fish. If you're into fishing, I don't really do it, but it is there. You'll have access to eggs all on this ravine, and naturally is pretty defensive, pretty flat here, tons of metal everywhere, so really great location. And this one is located at 157 negative 402. And finally, for the last place I'm going to recommend is probably here. I will say I would probably argue this may be a slightly better outpost than I would say a main base, but this is still pretty good early game. You'll have all this metal, obviously. Really flat island here. You have the Assassin's Creed towers that you should be picking up because they give you a view of the whole area. And then you're not too far from the research area where you can get a different variety of pals. So I would argue this is a pretty solid location as well, though you could make it an outpost and be completely fine and just have a bunch of turtles here mining that up. And if you're wondering where it's located, it is -1 negative 525. Very solid location. For my next tip, let's talk about a few things on the map that you should be paying attention to that's super important. One thing that is super important is paying attention to any form of notification that comes up on your screen that tells you either an airdrop is coming or meteorite is coming. You're going to need meteorites later for future things, but for early game or just like general gaming right now, I would highly recommend that you're keeping your eye out for those supply drops, because if you're looking on screen now, you will be able to get, once again, schematics. Now, these aren't anywhere near as good as doing some of the boss drops or the cave drops or anything like that, but since they're casually out in the overworld, you can easily go and do these. They'll just give you a ton of extra loot. Another thing to keep your eye on is for these little scrap things on the ground. These scrap things on the ground that you can pick up will actually drop some pretty valuable things. Depending on the region you're in, it can vary, what drops in them. But for example, the things you can expect to see in these are going to be like things like cement, which is a refining material that can be fairly hard to come by and takes a long time to craft early on. You can find pal balls of varying styles. You can find coins, and then of course you can find varying amounts of ammunition that can just really give you a little bit of a boost on some of your resources, so you don't have to spend a lot of time on them. And the other thing you really should keep your eye on is pal balls. Now, I'm sure you guys have noticed at this point, you're running into a ton of pal balls on the ground. And one thing to keep in mind about this mechanic is it is very much present through the entirety of the game at pretty much every map of the game. The reason why this is important is because if you go to, let's say, for example, a higher tier region like you see me doing on screen now, you will notice that there will be higher tier pal balls in those locations. Now, while I'm not telling you that you should be going over in those regions and fighting pals or anything, let's say for example you wanted to face off against one of the more deterministic spawning bosses, and you're not at the point where you can get some of the best legendary spears or whatever spears it is, let's say legendary hypothetically, then you can come over to these regions and go ahead and pick up different pal balls. So for example, while I'm not necessarily ready for the top left region, I'm able to just go over here with my bird, look for different pal balls on the ground and pick them up. And as you can see there, I was getting a lot of legendary pal balls that can just be used to go back to my main region. And it's not really a big deal. You can just teleport. It's not going to take you that much time. And you can just go ahead and get some really good pal balls to be used for your earlier captures and just kind of guarantee them. All right, next and finally, let's go over a few combat tips that should help you in a pretty big way. As you can see over here, we're in our party screen and we're taking a look at our pals and seeing what they're capable of doing. When you come over to their type here, you can see what each of these individual stats are weak to and what they're strong against. Like other monster catching games, it has the direct counter that it has and the thing is directly weak to. So this pal specifically is weak to grass, but is strong against electric, so we know what our counters are. Obviously, this is important information for anyone who's never played a game like this, that you need to make sure you're built for this. The other thing that's super important to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about fighting, is the thing that I see a lot of new trainers do, and that is not play your pal effectively. What I mean by this is, while you may have the matchup, let's say for example you're going against an electric enemy, you're a ground enemy, one thing you should try to do is avoid big attacks. In a lot of cases, a lot of the pals have some pretty obvious telegraphed attacks, and if you're in a fight and you see them about to do it, you can just summon or desummon your pal rather, and it'll come back to your pal ball and the enemy will still do its attack and just be there not hitting your ally. This is the benefit of playing a game that isn't turn-based like other monster catcher games, because you can actively maneuver and use your pals in a way. You can swap between pals and use them, and most importantly pull them back, and that's kind of what makes this so much better than those other games. You can actually have a higher skill ceiling by just kind of making sure they're not taking those big hits. Also keep in mind some of your pals have partner skills, so if you use a partner skill, desummon that one when it goes on cooldown, and then actively use another pal to cycle those out. You can be passive if you want and you know let the pals do it themselves, but if you want that extra bit of skill cap, just go ahead and make sure you're cycling your pal. And there you have it, guys. That's everything you need to know to have a pretty solid start in Palworld. If you're new, you're returning, or you're just trying to figure out how to be more effective, these tips should help you out in a very big way. If you are a seasoned Palworld player, make sure to drop some comments down below to help some players out. Maybe there's some base locations you think are really good, some other tips that I may have missed, or some other pals that I may have missed. There's like 73 new ones, so there could be something that's absolutely crazy early that I missed. Drop it down below so some other player can, pick it up and use it. If you do appreciate the work that goes into these videos, consider leaving me a like. That helps me out in a very big way. Or better yet, subscribe to the channel, because we got a lot more Palworld coming here on the channel. As always, guys, my name is Fervor. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video very soon.